My cousin Linda always said her house had a personality of its own, not in a spooky, haunted way, but in a lived-in, slightly chaotic, and ultimately comforting manner. It was the kind of house where you could kick off your shoes, sink into a plush armchair that had probably seen better days, and just breathe. And that's exactly what I needed. At 52, life had thrown me a few curveballs. A divorce that was more amicable than not, but still left a hollow ache, and the kids being grown and flown, leaving the nest unnervingly quiet. So, when Linda invited me to stay for a weekend while she and her husband, Tom, went on a little anniversary getaway, I packed my overnight bag before she could finish the sentence. The house was nestled in a quiet, tree-lined street in a part of town that felt a world away from my own sterile suburban cul-de-sac. The air here was different, thicker with the scent of blooming jasmine and freshly cut grass. Inside, the familiar, happy clutter of Linda's life greeted me like an old friend. Framed photos of her two boys, from gap-toothed grins to college graduations, lined the hallway. Her youngest, Leo, was still in college, a fact that always made me a little envious of the life still buzzing around her. My own home felt like a museum of a life once lived. I spent the first evening in a state of blissful solitude. I explored Linda's garden, a riot of colorful flowers and overgrown herbs, and then settled on the porch swing with a glass of iced tea and a book I'd been meaning to read for months. The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, and for the first time in a long time, a sense of peace settled over me. Linda had left me a lasagna in the fridge, and I ate it standing at the kitchen counter, feeling a strange sort of freedom in the simple act of not having to set a table for one. Later, wrapped in a cozy Afghan on the sofa, I flipped through old photo albums, a nostalgic journey through our shared childhoods. The house was quiet, the only sounds the gentle hum of the refrigerator and the occasional creak of the old floorboards. It was a comforting silence, not the empty one I was used to. I felt a pang of gratitude for Linda, for this little haven she had offered me. I eventually made my way to the guest room, a cozy space at the back of the house overlooking the garden. The bed was adorned with a handmade quilt, and the scent of lavender hung in the air. I drifted off to sleep easier than I had in months, lulled by the gentle chirping of crickets outside my window. It must have been well past midnight when I was stirred from my sleep. It wasn't a loud noise, more of a subtle shift in the house's atmosphere, a soft thud from downstairs, followed by the faint click of a door. My first thought was of Linda and Tom. Perhaps they'd come back early. But then I heard footsteps on the stairs, slow and measured, not the hurried steps of someone returning home. A flicker of unease went through me. I was alone in the house, after all. I sat up in bed, my heart thumping a little faster. The footsteps stopped right outside my door. I held my breath, my ears straining in the darkness. Then the doorknob began to turn, slowly, almost hesitantly. My mind raced through a dozen frantic scenarios. An intruder? A neighbor in trouble? The door creaked open, and a tall silhouette filled the frame, backlit by the dim hallway light. My breath hitched in my throat. He was tall, much taller than I remembered from the Christmas card photos. The soft glow from the hallway cast his face in shadows, but I could make out the familiar dark, curly hair and the set of his jaw, so much like his father's. He hadn't seen me yet, his gaze directed towards the floor, as if he was trying to be as quiet as possible. He took a hesitant step into the room, and I saw that he was carrying a duffel bag. It was then that I realized he must have come home from college for the weekend, completely unaware that his parents' guest room was occupied. My initial fear gave way to a wave of something else, something I couldn't quite name. It was a strange mix of surprise and a sudden, acute awareness of my own presence in this intimate family space. He finally looked up, and his eyes met mine across the dimly lit room. I saw the startled recognition in his gaze, followed by a flush of embarrassment that even the shadows couldn't hide. "Aunt Sarah," he whispered, his voice a low, husky sound that was deeper than I expected. "What are you doing here?" I found my own voice, a little shaky at first. "Leo, you scared me half to death." I tried for a light-hearted tone, but my heart was still doing a little pitter-patter against my ribs. A slow smile spread across his face, a charming, lopsided grin that instantly reminded me of a much younger Leo, the one who used to follow me around like a shadow during family gatherings. "I'm so sorry," he said, taking a step back as if to give me space. "I didn't know anyone was here. Mom and Dad didn't tell me. They went on a little trip," I explained, pulling the quilt a little higher. "I'm just house sitting for the weekend." He nodded, still standing in the doorway, a picture of youthful energy even in his stillness. He was wearing a simple t-shirt and jeans, and I was struck by how much he had grown up. The lanky teenager from my memories had been replaced by a young man with broad shoulders and a quiet confidence about him. "Well," he said, a hint of amusement in his voice, "this is a little awkward." I couldn't help but laugh. A genuine, warm sound that broke the tension in the room. Just a little. He shifted his weight, and the duffel bag he was holding thumped softly against the doorframe. "I was just going to crash here for the night. I have an early class on Monday, and I didn't want to drive all the way back tomorrow." "Of course," I said quickly. "This is your room, after all." I started to swing my legs out of bed. "I can take the sofa." "No, no," he protested immediately, stepping forward into the room. "Don't be silly. I can take the sofa. I've slept on it 1,000,000 times." We stood there for a moment in a strange sort of standoff in the middle of the night. The air was thick with an unspoken politeness, a shared understanding of the unexpectedness of the situation. But underneath it, I felt something else too. A connection, a flicker of something familiar, yet new. It was in the way he looked at me, not just as his aunt, but as a person, a woman. And in that moment, I saw a reflection of my own younger self in his eyes, a reminder of a time when life felt full of possibilities. "Tell you what," I said, a sudden idea forming in my mind. "The bed's big enough for two, as long as you don't snore." A surprised, boyish grin lit up his face. "Deal, but I can't make any promises." He dropped his duffel bag by the door and walked over to the other side of the bed. As he sat down, the mattress dipped, and I was suddenly very aware of his proximity. The scent of him, a clean, masculine scent of soap and something uniquely his own, filled the small space between us. I shifted, making room for him, my heart doing a little dance that had nothing to do with fear anymore. He was just a boy. I told myself, my cousin's son. But in the quiet intimacy of that moonlit room, he felt like so much more. He represented a life that was still unfolding, a story that was just beginning. And for a little while, I felt like I was a part of it. He settled into the bed beside me, the space between us charged with a silent energy. It wasn't uncomfortable, but it was present, a tangible awareness of another person in a way I hadn't experienced in a very long time. For a few minutes, we both lay there, staring up at the ceiling, the only sound the gentle hum of the house and our own soft breathing. "So," he said, his voice a low murmur in the darkness, "how have you been, Aunt Sarah?" "Really?" The question hung in the air, simple yet profound. It wasn't the polite surface level, "How are you?" I was used to. There was a genuine curiosity in his tone, a depth that surprised me. I turned my head on the pillow to look at him. In the faint light filtering through the window, I could see the earnest expression on his face. I've been okay, I admitted, the word feeling inadequate. Life's been a little quiet lately. He nodded, a thoughtful look in his eyes. Mom told me about the divorce. I'm sorry. It was for the best, I said, and to my surprise, the words felt true. We just grew apart, you know? I think so, he said, his gaze distant for a moment. I see it with my friends' parents sometimes. It's like they're living in the same house, but in different worlds. His insightfulness caught me off guard. He was young, but he had an old soul. We talked for what felt like hours, our voices soft whispers in the night. He told me about his classes, his passion for photography, and his dreams of traveling the world. I found myself opening up to him in a way I hadn't with anyone else, not even Linda. I told him about the emptiness of my house, the feeling of being untethered now that my role as a mother had shifted. He listened patiently, his presence a comforting anchor in the darkness. There was no judgment in his eyes, only a quiet understanding that soothed a part of my soul I didn't even know was aching. He spoke of his own uncertainties, the pressure to have it all figured out, the fear of making the wrong choices. And in that shared vulnerability, a bond formed between us, an invisible thread connecting two people at different crossroads of their lives. At some point, his hand found mine in the space between us. It was a simple, innocent gesture, yet it sent a jolt of warmth through me. His fingers were long and cool, and they laced through mine with a natural ease. It wasn't a romantic touch, but it was deeply intimate, a silent acknowledgement of the connection we had forged in the quiet hours of the night. I realized then that this unexpected encounter was more than just an awkward surprise. It was a gift, a reminder that life could still hold surprises, that new connections could be formed in the most unlikely of places. It was a gentle nudge from the universe, telling me that my story wasn't over, that there were still chapters left to be written. As the first hints of dawn began to lighten the sky, our conversation dwindled into a comfortable silence. He was still holding my hand, his thumb gently stroking the back of mine. I felt a profound sense of peace, a contentment that had been missing from my life for so long. You know, he said, his voice thick with sleep, you're not just my aunt, Sarah. You're a really cool person. A smile touched my lips. You're not so bad yourself, Leo. He squeezed my hand gently before pulling away and turning onto his side. His back to me, I watched the gentle rise and fall of his shoulders as he drifted off to sleep. I stayed awake a little longer, the first rays of the morning sun casting a golden glow into the room. I felt a sense of renewal, a quiet joy that was both new and familiar. The night had started with an unexpected intrusion, a moment of fear and uncertainty, but it had blossomed into something beautiful, something I knew I would cherish for